At this time, I would like to welcome Mr. Thebe Ikalafeng, founder and CEO of Brand Leadership.
Good morning, Africans. Oh, sorry, it's morning for me because now it is exactly 8 hours earlier. I was in Las Vegas yesterday, but I was not gambling. I was investing on Africa's future. So I just landed, and I'm just landed today, and I have a commitment to be here, and I'm happy to be here to share with you. Not so much of a speech, but just want to share with you some thoughts, some insights in this journey that we're all traveling here today, and we're all going to travel when we leave here in building this continent. And in doing so, I want to pick a few dates and moments which I think are significant and we should never ever forget as fellow Africans in the journey towards a great Africa. Now remember, on the 6th of March in 1957, Ghana became the first African country to achieve independence from Britain. Now, the second most important date, I say to me, will be the date in the 24th of May in 1963, when 33 Africans got together to form what is today the African Union. I must say I'm inspired by that time, and I'm quite surprised, and when I look back on our continent, to see how little we've achieved or how much we still have to achieve since that vision which was set out in 1963. Now here are some highlights of what inspires me, and I think what should all inspire us as Africans. At that meeting on the 24th, the day before the OAU was formed, Kwame Nkrumah sat with the 32 leaders, and one of the things that he said, he said, as Africans, we must unite, else we will perish. But to me, what was important in terms of what he said was he then went out to lay out the principles of what we should be doing as Africans. And in reflecting on that speech, I was quite astounded by the things that are still occupying us today, which should occupy us, which should liberate us. Because I think what we should all agree as Africans is we have not yet achieved our independence. Even the land that we are overseeing, we do not own it yet. So all we've got the keys to political freedom, if you will. But with that political freedom, we are supposed to have advanced the African agenda much faster than it has. Now, the things that Kwame Nkrumah said at that time, which are quite important, and I think if anybody wants to write the African agenda, they don't need to go too far. They just need to take that speech which was delivered on the 24th of May and just implement it, and will be a greater continent today. I want to highlight the three things that he said then, and you will see why it's so important. He then said we need to set out a commission for work and work out a plan for a unified or common economic and industrial program for Africa. Industrialization, 1963. The second thing that he said, we also need to work towards having a common African currency. And the third thing that he said, we need to establish an African central bank. Now let me reflect a little bit on why I specifically highlighted just those three things among all the other things that he said. All we have been saying, and whether it's the African Development Bank or whether it's any African leaders when they get together, the things that they always say is that what we need to do to push this continent forward is we need to industrialize. In other words, we need to own the means of production. We need to create the products and the services that we need as Africans. We need to brand them. We need to feed ourselves, because we know our tastes, we know our needs, we know our conditions. And we need to industrialize. We are still talking about industrialization today, and we are not making as fast a progress as we're supposed to. That's why it's so important for us here today, because when we leave this room today, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, are we doing that which we are supposed to do as Africans? Are we feeding ourselves? Are we educating ourselves? Are we paying for our own costs? Because many of the ills of our continent are because we are not in charge of our own destiny. What is more inspiring is in 1998, the founder of the Thabo Mbeki, the former president of the Republic of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, said also something that's quite important. I also urge you to go get that speech. That speech was delivered in 1998 on the 9th of April on the African Renaissance, and that speech was given to United Nations University. And I want to quote you only one thing that I always remember out of that speech. And what he said is that out of Africa Reborn must come out modern products of human and economic activity and significant contribution to the world of knowledge in the arts, science, technology, new images of an Africa of peace and prosperity. In other words, we in the new Africa, similar to what Kwame Nkrumah said in 1963, we need to create our future. We need to consume our own products and services that we have created out of our own imagination in an Africa that is at peace. Now, the Africa that is at peace, Africa is much more peaceful than it used to be. I think around 2000 or so, there were about 11 raging wars across the continent. In many thanks to our Thabo Mbeki and many other African leaders, there's been a lot of progress made in ensuring that this continent is much more peaceful and this continent is working together. So Africa is much more at peace. That's why at the 50th anniversary of the African Union, when we all gathered in Addis Ababa, we all left there with one vision of 2063. And that 50 years hence from 2013, in 2063, we need to see an Africa that is peaceful, an Africa that is prosperous, and an Africa that's united. It's a simple goal. Because the goal is achievable because we are responsible and we are in charge. At least we should be. Now, I'll tell you what is interesting about this continent of ours. Whenever you read about Africa, we have headlines like Africa Rising. Of course, a few years ago, economists said Africa is the hopeless continent. But they did change their mind in 2010, as well as Time magazine, when they spoke about the hopeful continent, and they spoke about an Africa that is rising. Now, the things that they always say when they talk about our continent glowingly, when they talk about our continent glowingly, they say things like, this continent is rising at 3.7% economic growth. It's one of the fastest rising economies in the world. Of course, last year, when we started the year, we started at 5.5%, but things have not quite worked out as we all planned. But 3.7 is still nothing to look down on, because many other countries are just hoping to make ends meet. The second thing that's always quoted about our continent, which makes everybody wants to be here, is that 4 of the 10 fastest rising economies in the world come from Africa. So 4 of the fastest rising countries come from Africa. And folks, there's more than, I have no clue how many countries there are, but normally when they look at countries and they do comparatives, they look at, the World Bank looks at about 183 countries. Now, 4 of those 183 countries or 4 out of 10 countries in the continent in the world come from Africa, and are noted as some of the fastest rising. The things that they love to say about our continent, they say 70% of the continent is under the age of 30. What they say that this continent has got a demographic dividend. They say this continent is young. Folks, we have the future ahead of us and not behind us if we are in charge. The things that they always say is that this continent, by 2050, right now, I don't know how they count. I don't know whether they count the way they used to count during apartheid days. In apartheid, they just used to fly the helicopter above your house, and they said there's one black house, there must be 10 blacks in there. Move on, next one. But irrespective of how they keep count these days, they say we're about 1.2 billion, 900. I don't know, it keeps changing. But I think they're still using old helicopters. But be that as it may, they say that by 2050, there will be 2 billion Africans. I think I've seen estimates like it'll be 40% of the world's population. I have no doubts because nobody knows how to procreate like an African. All it means, folks, is that if we are seeing that we are not achieving that goal, we need to get to work. When they talk about our continent, they say that by 2020, we are talking 5 years' time, we would be spending $1 trillion in this continent. I do not doubt that stats as well, because nobody knows how to shop like an African. We may not be creating the jobs. You know what's amazing is I drive here and I come here and I see there's a big Mall of Africa coming up. Nobody builds malls more than Africans, especially South Africans, because the one thing we know how to do is to spend. So if we are going to spend $1 trillion by 2020, we've got a couple of challenges. The first challenge that we have is that demographic dividend they talk about. What does it help if 70% of the continent is under the age of 30, but 60% of them are unemployed or unemployable? We need to be educating them. Because if they're educated, they'll be able to fulfill the promise or the hope that Thabo Mbeki expressed, that out of this continent must come up new ideas, must come up new products, new services that are born of the African experience, African conditions, and African needs. What does it help? That there'll be 2 billion of us, folks. If all 40 billion have their hands outstretched in aid. We are still the #1 aid recipient in the world. I don't think that is a statistic we want to be proud of, because what it says is that they get money and they spend it. Because we spend $1 trillion, we create a lot of people, we create poor people, and all they do is to go out and spend the money. Here is the biggest problem I see. Every year I do research across African countries. This year, I'm doing it, we've just finished it across 22 countries. We have done research across 22 countries. In every single economic zone, in every single African region. The research we do under Brand Africa 100, where we are looking at Africa's best brands, will startle you. Because you will find, as you will read tomorrow's Independence, or you'll see when I announce on Thursday, on the 22nd of October, the bigger results, that only 25% of the brands that Africans admire are African. Because we are very quick to sing the praises of a made in America, made in China, made in Europe, and very quick to denigrate anything made in Africa. Because we have a poor self-image. And that self-image is manifesting itself in what we consume. So I'm not excited about $1 trillion if that $1 trillion is going to be spent 75% on products which are not made in Africa. You will discover in the research that the #1 country that spends, that creates brands, that sells to Africa is the US. 20% of the brands that Africans admire are American brands. But this is what startles me the most. All of us are excited. I see a young lady there with a beautiful dress. Young lady, what a beautiful dress you're wearing there. And you see the young lady, the young guy next to Kojo, what an amazing shirt he's wearing as well. There is a reason I pointed out those clothes. Because the #1 marketer of fabrics in Africa, the ones that we are so proud to adorn among ourselves. Because you know, when I listen to designers, they say, you know, you must get Vlisco because Vlisco is better quality, or wooden, or GTP. Those 3 brands are all owned by the Dutch. And we see them everywhere in the continent. We celebrate them. We wear them. If you look on the list that we will publish, you'll see how far they are on the rankings, because Africans love everything that is not made in Africa. You will see that among the top brands will come brands like Coca-Cola, Apple, and Samsung. Now, there's only one of those brands. There's a reason they do well in Africa. There's a reason Samsung does well in Africa. You know, when I spent time with the CEO of Samsung for Africa, and I asked him, why are you so successful in Africa? What do you do different? He says, I have been to every African home, 53 countries in Africa. And I've sat in the kitchens, in the dining rooms. I've gone to their markets. That is why when they created their Built for Africa program, they were responding to African conditions. Now, an African will look at load shedding, or dumso as they call it in Ghana and many other countries, they call it many different names, and they say Eskom is useless. Samsung says, Eskom has just given me an opportunity to create products out of solar energy. We need to change our mindsets. Because if we look at the problems which are confronting us, we should immediately reframe and not call them problems, and say, here is an opportunity. The way Samsung, that's why Samsung is number 1 and has displaced Apple in many ways, in many countries, and has certainly displaced Nokia in Africa. Because they've looked at Africa, all the challenges that we see and we point out every day, they've looked at them and they say, here is a continent we can make money from, because they don't see the gold mine when it hits them. Folks, in 1990, when China came to our continent, well, they've been around, but 1990 they really came with a suitcase. They came to work. They had $1 billion in their suitcase. 2015, 350 billion in Africa. They are here to work. This is what I love about my Chinese brothers and sisters. When they come to build your road, to build your building, or thereby on the way to the airport where they're putting I don't know how many billions, what I love about them is there is an Air China aeroplane that comes filled with Chinese workers who, instead of spending time in jail, have to go and earn the money for their brothers and sisters in Africa. Because we are too proud to dirty our hands. But they are very clever to look after their money. They bring those people here not because they can't find good labor in Africa. They bring those people here because if you are going to spend money, you need your own kind to be looking after that money. China is probably now the number 1 investor in Africa. Now, here's the amazing thing about China. China is in 53 of the 54 official African countries with a suitcase. America is in 49 of the 54 African countries with a gun. They are here protecting their interests with guns. And the Chinese are here making money out of your continent. That's why Jay Naidu said at the Brand Africa Forum we ran a couple of years ago, China has an agenda for Africa. Europe has an agenda for Africa. America has an agenda for Africa, but Africa has no agenda for Africa. If we are to move this continent forward, we need to own that agenda. We need to own our renaissance. We cannot afford to have our continent being mortgaged. Because for every dollar that is being invested here by a non-African business or brand, there's nothing immoral with what they do. They have to account back to their owners, to their investors. They have to show a return on investment. The way they do it, which is the reason a Coca-Cola, a Samsung, an Apple, and many others are successful in this continent, is they take the time to understand us. They learn how we walk, how we speak, how we dress, what worries us, our emotional issues, and they respond to that. And they give us the products and services we are very proud to wear, and we don't look down on them. We are too lazy. We want to blame everybody. We want to borrow instead of creating. Owning the African Renaissance is owning every single part of it. It's owning not just the means of production. It's owning not just the land. It's owning not just the name. It's not good enough to say I'm an African, or not good enough to say I'm South African, whatever we call ourselves these days. It is better if you really own that. And we don't own that. I want to conclude with two important messages I want us to remember as we leave here. I want us to remember what Fela Kuti said. I must identify with Africa, then I will have an identity. Many of us are too ashamed to be Africans. Many of us are too ashamed to go like Samsung to the other countries within our continent. Many of us live in the south of Africa, not in Africa. The second thing I want you to remember is what Thomas Piketty said last week when he was here in South Africa. I think Thomas should have been an African. First, he obviously opened the book with an African, with African reality. But I left that event with an important, with an uplifting reminder. When he said, Africa is the future. But I love what my friend Victor Dlamini articulated it well for me. He said, Europe has a past, America has a past, but Africa has a future. Thank you.